Welcome to the Business of Music. I'm Jan Hall from Folk Roots Radio.
And I'm Gary Glass from Quantum Sound Productions.
The Business of Music is a new video and audio podcast devoted to all aspects of the music business. Through interviews and discussion, our goal is to help independent artists make headway in a rapidly changing musical business environment.
Yes, Jan, and you can find us on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Leave your comments. We'd love to see your comments. Also, the podcast is on SoundCloud, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. It's a great show. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're very pleased to welcome into the studio English singer-songwriter Chris Ronald, who now makes his music in Vancouver with an Americana and Canadiana sound that has been described as Canadian folk with British roots. We're pleased to welcome into the studio today Chris Ronald. Now, I've known Chris Ronald for quite a while. He's an English singer-songwriter, now living in Vancouver, moved to Vancouver in 2002. And since he moved to Canada, he's really developed a great music career as a singer-songwriter. For instance, his last two albums, the most recent album, Fragments from 2017, it's one of my favorite albums of the year. I get teased for that a lot, but it's true. It's a great, great album out on the Borealis Records label, which, as far as folk music and singer-songwriters is concerned, is probably pretty much one of the best record labels, certainly in Canada, that are out there today. The album before that, Timeline from 2014, was nominated for a Canadian Folk Music Award for English Songwriter of the Year. So I think this guy knows his stuff.
Sounds that way.
And we're pleased to welcome into the studio Chris Ronald. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm very well, thanks.
You must get tired of me making those wonderful introductions.
I could sit here all day.
Just keep doing the introduction. Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words.
So let's start the discussion by talking about your music, because, as I mentioned, you moved to Canada in 2002. Did you have a career as a singer-songwriter before you left the UK?
No. I dabbled as a teenager with a band. I was writing songs then, and the band would play a mix of those songs and covers. And then it's just something that just kind of always bubbled away, but I never did anything serious with it. In Sunderland,
it's the Sunderland joke started.
Yeah,
just to warn everybody.
The interesting thing is that one of my favorite things to do now is house concerts, and but I remember taking my guitar to house parties at university, and I would do like a chill out set, like after the DJ had gone home, and
everybody's mellowing down.
It almost feels like it's come full circle, although it was way more formal so many years ago. So it was really when I came to Canada that I got really motivated around it. I got re-inspired, and I decided that I was going to do something more, comprehensive with it. Yeah.
So when you say re-inspired, was that when you thought, I want to start recording some of these songs, or was it I want to get out and perform? I mean, did the performing come before the recording?
It all kind of came at the same time, really. I wrote songs to perform, and I remember when I moved to Vancouver, I decided to train to become a teacher. And as part of because I had an inferior degree from England, I had to
remember that story.
I had to do some makeup courses, but that included one course which was an introduction to electroacoustic music. It didn't really matter what course I took, so long as I got my credit. So it could be considered an art course too. And that introduced me to my first experience with multi-track recording software. And so off the back of that, I recorded my first two albums. And and then I qualified to be a teacher, and I was a full-time teacher, and then for a few years, and then I suddenly had 3 kids, and I decided to take 2 years off to be a stay-at-home dad. And that's when things started to change. And I realized that I had to pursue music, otherwise I was going to be miserable. And so during those 2 years, I started writing. I think I was inspired by my kids, by having kids for a start. And I recorded my second album, and I put it out independently, like CD Baby, I think it was back then. I'm not even sure if they exist anymore. But
they're a growing concern.
Yeah, put it out on CD Baby, and I mailed out a few copies, like to the Georgia Straight, which is the local Vancouver entertainment paper, which is still going. And that was kind of towards the end of my 2 years off. I went back teaching after those 2 years, and during the first term, I got a review from the Georgia Straight. And I remember actually, it popped up. You can do something on Google, so if your name's mentioned, it'll give you a notification. If it sees your name somewhere on the internet, it'll send you a notification. Can't remember when I set that up, but anyway. So this thing pinged on my phone, and I looked at it at recess, and it was like, oh my God, he really likes it. And so then that kind of started the wheels in motion. I was like, somebody respected is giving me high praise for an album that I wrote and produced in my basement.
And that was the second album.
Yeah. And by the first term, I was depressed. And I think having spent that time with my kids, having got back into my music, and then trying to fit back into the 9 to 5, by Christmas I was depressed. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to, how can I pursue the music, keep a family going, keep the money coming in, but honor my heart, And so that's when I decided, what I could do is I could just take a step back from the teaching, become a supply teacher, a substitute teacher, which would allow me to block time off if I need to go off on tour or anything like that. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 or so years, is plugging away at my music and then earning the bread and butter by teaching while I'm at home.
And how does that feel? Does that feel real good?
It does. I enjoy going into a different classroom every day, the variety of it. But then I also enjoy blocking 2 weeks off to come to Ontario to perform music. And I think going back to your comment about the writing, the performing, I was interviewed last year at the Salmon Arm Roots and Blues Festival, which is one of the big ones on the circuit. And the question was, what do you prefer? Do you prefer writing, recording, or performing? And I was like, that's a really good question. And I think the answer is, after some thought, performing. And the beauty of being a songwriter as well is that you can write for your own performance. So you can write to showcase a certain element of your vocal ability, or you can write to show off some guitar work and stuff like that you couldn't do if you were just doing covers all the time.
It really spreads your personality and your interests in life and what you feel is close to your heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's communicating and trying to make those connections with fellow humans as well is very gratifying.
So when you started to work on Timeline, which was the 2014 breakthrough album, I mean, it's basically 5 people I think get nominated for an award like that. I mean, you didn't win it, unfortunately, but you're up against some people making great music as well, which is a really good thing. Did it take long for you to bring the songs together for that album? I mean, were these songs that you had been performing and were comfortable with, or were these songs that were specifically written with an album in mind?
No, not written with an album in mind, but I don't try and force the process. If I'm not inspired, if the muse isn't with me, I don't try and force it. I just wait for it. And so I write when something clicks and it's like, oh, that's a good idea. There might be a snippet of a lyric or something that I like and can kind of build on, or a melody. And so I wrote the songs as they came. And then I started thinking, I've got almost enough for an album. So I did write maybe a couple of the tunes just to get the number of tracks up. I think there's 11 tracks on that album. So, it was writing without an album in mind, but yeah.
So when you write, I mean, are you somebody that comes up with a melody first and then thinks about lyrics, or are you one of those people that has a little book and will scribble down,
It
thoughts
can come from any angle, but a lot of the songs that I've written more recently are words first. And so I just find that if I can shut everything else off and just focus on the lyrics as I'm writing the poetry, I find the melody might pop out just kind of from the meter of the words. And then once I've got a melody, then I can put chords to it. So I have done quite a lot of songs where it's focusing on the poetry. And I also find that I think doing the lyrics first also makes a statement about what I feel is important in a song. And I really hold great stock in the quality of lyrics and what they're communicating. So I put them first in the process. Yeah.
Are you able to write at home, or is that one of those things that you prefer to do, maybe go away for a few days and work?
I generally do write at home. I've got a little studio. It's kind of a multi-purpose type media room that I can go.
But you can lock the kids out.
More or less. You can hear them still above me, but that's not to say, songs can come in the most unexpected and unusual places. I have a song from Timeline called The Busker, and I wrote it in Stanley Park. Stanley Park is the park there in the center of Vancouver. And it started to come when my kids were sitting on the little train that goes around Stanley Park with their mum. And suddenly these lyrics started coming down, so I literally wrote it on my phone. By the time I'd left Stanley Park, I had 3 verses. And then I went home and put the chorus and the harmonica lead in. So you just never know when it's going to come.
It's funny,
But you better be ready when it does.
I was interviewing someone else today, and we had exactly the same conversation about suddenly being in a place when an idea for a song comes up, and the benefits of having your cell phone there and being able to record something, whether it's just words or even perhaps a melody or something. It really helps the actual process. Of making music.
I was literally writing, tapping the words into Notepad, into the notebook of my phone.
So the most recent album, Fragments, now that was the 2017 album. I mentioned it's a fabulous album, one of my favorite albums.
Thank you.
Of that year. That was on the Borealis Record label.
Yeah.
Now Timeline wasn't, I don't think. No. Was it because of Timeline that they decided to take a look at you?
Because of that, the CFMA nomination. I went to the awards, obviously with fingers crossed, in Ottawa, and I got to play a showcase. And so the partners at Borealis were there. They obviously had heard my album because they're probably part of the
process,
the judges and jury, and then they got to see me perform live, and it was kind of off the back of that they came up and approached me and said that we'd be interested in working with you on your next project.
Now, as much as Borealis is a great label, I mean, I love their packaging. One of the things I love is just getting an album that has Borealis written on it, because I know that any music they send me is going to be music that I definitely want to listen to, and I probably I will play on the radio because I can't think of an album that they have sent me that I thought, no, that doesn't fit with my radio show. But things are a lot different from the days of labels when, you would sign for a label and they would, give you some money to go away and play and make music. That's not the arrangement at all. I mean, it's almost, is it more like a deluxe distribution deal that they have? I'm trying to work out the right way. I don't want to offend anybody if I say
no, it's a good point. It's, put it this way, the reason why I signed was because, first of all, I felt that it gave that credibility that I needed, that the label was interested enough to want to work with me, and I could have easily have done it independently again, like I did with Timeline. They're called aggregators, distribution aggregators. TuneCore is one of them. CD Baby is another one. And so I actually put Timeline out through TuneCore, and that then puts it and Bandcamp, I think, but TuneCore puts it out in all the digital places too, right? So it's, in terms of distribution, I don't think that the distribution of Fragments was much different to what I was able to do by myself. The difference was what you alluded to earlier. One of the things that they offered was kind of a mass mail out of the album once it was ready, of like 900 units. And I'm like, well, for me to do that, that's a huge undertaking and a costly one. And I don't have all the addresses,
Yeah, they have that distribution
so they have the infrastructure in place.
So these are mailing out for radio stations and
reviewers and everything else.
Basically review and radio. Yeah, and I'm glad I did, because I've received more radio play from that album than anything else I've put out myself. In fact, like my song "Everything Goes Green," which is the opening track to Fragments, was the number 2 Canadian song for folk DJs. You're probably aware there's a chart called Folk DJ, I think.
Yeah, folk DJ chart. Yeah.
And as folk DJs voluntarily send in their spin information, and based on that they compile a chart. And so on that chart, "Everything Goes Green" was the number 2 Canadian song. We're talking like campus and community and streaming radio mostly, but even still, it's
something.
It's getting out there, which is what I wanted. I was trying to extend my reach, right? And now it's also been picked up by Stingray, so there's like 3 songs that are on their rotation, and that's curated. So that's not just kind of randomly selected. It's curated, and so I played a house concert again in Mission, BC, and I started playing my song "Freedom Train," and the woman in front of me was like, "I know this song." She was singing along to it because she has Stingray on in the background all the time. So I think, but what I'm trying to demonstrate here is how much it's helped raise awareness around my music, and given that stamp of approval from Borealis has definitely helped to get those envelopes opened by the folk DJs and other influences.
Is that an album by album deal? I mean, you will go back in the studio, make another album probably sometime in the next year or so.
Yeah.
Can I assume that you would, Borealis may be interested in picking that up, or is it depends very much on how they feel at the time and what else they're putting out?
No, so I signed to do the album and then to put out one more in a space of 5 years.
Okay.
So, Fragments is a couple of years old almost now, so starting to think about that.
That's a good deal.
Next project.
Yeah, it's good for the independent, for sure.
Yeah.
So currently you're touring Ontario.
Yeah.
So I think what people maybe watching want to know is how did you set that up? How do you just, cold call and send out emails and do things like that? Places you've been before perhaps, or people that go to these places?
Yeah.
You said you have a couple of house concerts coming up too. So like how did you arrange a lot of that?
I feel of all the other provinces in Canada, aside from BC, of course, where I reside, I have more of a relationship in Ontario than any other province. And that's mostly because of Folk Music Ontario conference, where I met you. And was that Folk Alliance?
No, that was Folk Music Ontario.
Yeah, it was, Folk Music Ontario. I've been there twice. And so, I'm not the best networker. I kind of, kind of dread it sometimes, don't like small talk, and I'd rather just play. Like it? Great.
Let your
I'm not
music
going
do
to
the
try and make
talking.
you like it, but anyway, I've made connections through that conference, and it's one thing though making connections and building relationships, but it's another thing to see, that there's maybe an opportunity for something there and to follow up on that. Mm-hmm. So I try wherever possible to, at least make a mental note, but actually write it down on my phone, which is usually on my person. Just kind of file away for something to consider for next time in Ontario, right? And I remembered, Jan, for example, that you had mentioned when you interviewed me, you'd mentioned Sun Parlor sessions, and it kind of, I was like, oh, maybe I should get in touch with Jan and see if that's a possibility. So thank you for that, by the way.
Oh,
yeah.
I should mention that Chris Ronald did join us for a Sun Parlor Coffee House session as well. So definitely check out that at sunparlorsessions.com.
So, but
you're really liking the house concert concept, right?
Yeah.
It's a reasonable sized crowd with, very intimate, and and the people are there for you, not to have a meal or to, socialize or whatever. So how's that working for you?
It's like it fits my performance, that kind of intimate show. Where I don't feel that I have to kind of quickly brush over the story behind the song. I can give people a bit more of an in-depth account of how it came about. I'm not like rambling on, but but time and time again, it's like people come up to me and tell me how much they love hearing the story. And then the song, obviously, that follows. But so, there's some venues where you feel maybe you have to gloss over that a little bit, because like, come on, get playing. I don't want to hear the banter, but I always feel from house concerts that people are there to have a more intimate experience and to get to
they're more interested in you as a person, as a, an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a house concert can be anything from 30 up to 100 people. And I was saying to Jan earlier, it kind of takes the risk out of it a little bit as well for the artist. Sometimes you might have to hire a venue and you're never quite sure. As much as you try and pull out the stops to get people out, it can be a risky business.
It can fall flat.
Especially these days when people have so many other distractions and things to do. The house concert model kind of takes a little bit of the risk out of it for the artist too. So now I'm not saying that that's all I do, but I'm just saying it's something that's becoming more and more popular.
And you're playing other venues too, right? So I think your next stop is what, Kingston?
Kingston, and that's, I think I'm doing like 3 sets of music, and I'll probably throw some covers in, and it's more of a music bar, music cafe type deal. But you go there and you're never sure like what level of listening is going to be going on, right?
And I guess it gets easier when you get more well known, talking about the benefits of getting on a prestigious boutique label like Borealis. I mean, suddenly, people like myself will always open that envelope first because they know what they're getting is something really good.
Yeah.
And I guess that makes the whole networking thing easier, because I think when you go to a folk conference and you have, anywhere from 300 or 400 people to 1,000 or 1,200, depending on where it is.
Yeah.
If you don't have any profile at all,
that's right.
It gets really hard to actually go up and say, "Hi, I'm Chris Ronald."
You're one in a million.
Yeah.
Trying to, meet the same objective as so many other fish in the pond. So it is important to get that kind of little leg up. Just kind of following on from your question about booking, it's probably the hardest part of the job and the least desirable part of the job, but it is getting easier.
You can make a lot of contacts online. And most venues will have, a booking email or at least contact information.
Yeah.
So that would kind of facilitate it a little bit.
Yeah.
But still, you have to wait for responses, and you never know what you're going to get.
and I think that, with the emergence of organizations that will facilitate that, we have Home Roots out of Winnipeg. I mean, they put on, they've collected house concert venues in, the West and the East Ontario.
Yeah.
And, if you get on their roster, that obviously is a good way of being able to get on a circuit of 7 or 8 shows or whatever.
And it's definitely on my to-do list.
And then there's also that new one, the Side Door Access, that Dan Mangan is involved with. Now, that sounds a very cool place, because it basically seems to be like a dating game for few musicians. If you have a venue that is looking for people to play, and if you're a musician, then trying to bring people together.
Yeah, and I've actually just recently signed up with Side Door. It's quite a slick platform. And that's what it is. Yeah. It's matching artists with venues that might otherwise be off the radar.
Yeah. Have you had the chance to use a booking agent at all? I mean, is that something that's ever appealed, or you just don't feel you're at that level of being able to put someone in charge of that who's going to take 10% of whatever?
Yeah, it's in? Like as much as I don't relish the sitting down and firing off hundreds of emails and with the hope of maybe getting a response from 5% of them. I've come through experience to the conclusion that nobody is going to do a better job than me.
Yeah, because you're more interested.
Because I have the ultimate vested interest.
Sure.
Right? And so I had dabbled with an agent and a little disappointed, but and that kind of sealed it for me. It's like, no, from now on, I'm just going to do it myself. I can take myself in the direction that I want to go. It just means I got to build it up from build it up from scratch, pretty much.
So you manage your own career. Mm-hmm. What about marketing? What about social media? What do you do? Are you very interested in doing that, or is it just a necessary evil?
I'm pretty good at using Facebook and Twitter when I've actually got something to talk about. So that's when I'm touring, or maybe I'm making an album. I'm not very good at kind of keeping it going in between times. So it might sit kind of quiet for a few months, and then I've got a new tour coming and I want to tell everybody about it. That
seems to be the standard situation for most people. It's like when the iron's hot, you strike, and then when it cools off, you have very little to say about it.
Yeah.
But I think that the people who regard themselves as experts in that area would say that you have to keep...
Yes,
absolutely.
That's kind of why
keep the wheel turning all the time.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I decided, just for my radio, to look at methods of actually automating. I picked up a service called Social Bee recently, which actually allows you can program your Facebook and your Twitter and pretty much any social media network, and then you can rotate things. So in those fallow periods where you think you haven't got anything to talk about, and I always say to people, just because you don't have an album, it's like that new to you thing. It's like I've interviewed people who would say, they spend a year making an album, and then by the time they put it out, they're already feeling like it's old because it took a year to do it. And it's like, well, if you take it somewhere else, it's new. You know, you're actually going other places with it. And it's sort of getting that mentality that just because something was recorded a year ago or 2 years ago doesn't mean it's worth bringing back, refreshing and talking about. But, you know, it sounds to me that doesn't always go with the artistic side to think about the business aspect.
The thing is, and this is another conclusion I drew, is social media can be very misleading. And so, you know, you might set up a Facebook event. You have all these people saying that they're either interested or going. You do the event. It's like, well, where are they all?
Well, I like the idea.
Exactly.
But you want me to come out?
It's like, are you supporting me? Are you just kind of saying you're interested so it looks good on Facebook? Or are you actually interested, you know? So, yeah, it's not the be-all and end-all. You know, the other thing that I do is, if I've got, again, anything to shout about, is I have my own newsletter subscribers that I send.
That's good. That's a good idea.
Send emails to. That's more effective than Facebook, to be honest, because it goes direct to the person. They get that personal communication.
Yeah,
you know.
So every time you do a show, you would collect
No,
names?
more if it's a talk. Yes, yeah. So I have a sign-up sheet.
Yeah, sign-up sheet. Yeah.
At my shows, and just gradually building that base, you know. And then when I'm back there, I'll let them know.
Which it kind of goes with the house concert
Yeah.
style of things, because you know that most people who start a house concert series will eventually, you know, maybe slow at the start, but eventually you start to build up a good list of names of people who appreciate the people you're bringing in and will come out and support them.
I think that the house concert concept it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it too much before, but it seems to be like a whole nother, you know, way to go with you know, touring and things. And it seems like it's, you know, catching on. It's a little tricky maybe for if, you know, your insurance and things like this, but I guess there's rules to follow. And it sounds like now there's people and businesses out there to help facilitate that. So it's very interesting. So what about streaming? Have you made millions on streaming so far? Or, you know?
No. You know, I'm on Spotify, and I guess part of the distribution, I go into all those digital realms that, you know, we don't need to talk about Spotify and the return for the artist there, because it's negligible unless you're getting millions of spins. And so, like, the rap artists do pretty well on Spotify, and that's, you know, the most highly consumed
you get into
genre right now.
You get into these playlists, and if you make it into a playlist, like there's a local artist who's made it into one of these playlists, and she does. I think she's still doing fairly well. Which is impressive. But it seems to be very few and far between that people make these lists.
And there is an art to it. There's an art to. You know, it takes time. You're sitting down and you are trying to forge a relationship with the people who curate these playlists. I just haven't got the time to sit down and try and find yet another way to deal with digital. And so, and it kind of feeds into what my kind of final comment on the matter is, that nothing replaces the physical presence, the performance, you know, getting out there and setting up your shows and broadcasting your music that way, the way that it always was meant to be broadcast, which is right from the artist.
Which that also goes to that whole idea of, as much as the business side might feel alien to a lot of people, you have to, you know, when you find a venue that looks like it would be suitable for your music, make sure that you're noting that information, reaching out to people, you know, and trying to get in there. I think that's the key, because as you mentioned earlier, there is so many other potential distractions out there, whether we're talking TV, video, games, movies, whatever, that it's easy for people to say, oh, I don't need to go to live music. I can, you know, click on Spotify or whatever.
Well, it's clear that you enjoy the performing. So that's definitely your track that you want to follow.
That's my emphasis. It's like, you know, I hold the highest importance in finding new places to perform because I love the performing side of it. I don't particularly like the sitting in front of a computer side of it. You know, I'd just rather be out there doing.
Might as well be a teacher, right?
What about grant writing? Because, you know, grants can really make it easier for people to tour. You know, you can get grants to make video. You can get grants to make albums.
Yeah.
Does that come into the realm of this is work that I have to do, that I don't really want to do? It seems to me that once you break in and get actually used to writing grants, it gets easier. I mean, obviously, granting agencies change all the time, particularly on the political flavor and the you know, the specific area of the country. But how do you find that writing grants works out?
The other key benefit of signing up with Borealis was that they actually recommended a grant writer.
Oh, nice.
To me.
Okay.
So I then communicated directly with that person, and because I'm signed to Borealis, it's also a slightly different process. They kind of get direct board approval on grants, so that means it kind of leapfrogs all those other independent. In a way, it kind of leapfrogs all those independent applications, you know, from independent artists. So I was successful in getting funding for Fragments. Now, it doesn't cover the whole cost, but, you know, a good chunk of it, so that not all the risk is on me. And then they'll support your tour as well.
So like a tour like this coming to Ontario, you get support for some of that?
There's a certain window where you can draw on available funds after you've made the recording. That window's shut now. But that the European touring I was doing last year was helped by Factor. So that's great because I wanted to take a bigger sound with me. I wanted to take John, my sideman, and Mike, the fiddle player, percussionist, out there and make more of a splash, right? And so when I've got a little bit of funding helping me with flights and car hire and stuff like that, I'm more likely to do that, and it makes for a better show and a more fun tour, you know.
And may potentially play a little bit bigger venues.
Yeah. It's more of an offering. Recently, I'm pleased to say I've had success with Canada Council for the first time, and actually, I was amazed by how streamlined their website is for applying. So. It's not it's never really a particularly enjoyable activity, grant writing, but like you said, once you're kind of through the door, once you're on their radar, you are then potentially writing a grant, and you kind of feel that you've actually got a chance of getting it, which makes
I think holds people
which
back,
makes
right?
the grant writing more bearable, rather than, you know, you're just kind of doing all this upfront work and you've got the attitude like.
So some of the grants you write, and others are written by a grant writer.
I applied to Canada Council, and I got some travel money for a tour I did last year, and I've applied to them for this one, but. So often, you know, you don't have your tour all nailed down until, you know, a month or so. But so long as you, you know, a month or so before you leave. But so long as you, at least with Canada Council, so long as you apply to them before you actually fly, then it's in the system, but you might have to wait months before you hear whether or not you're successful.
So if you're talking to somebody who isn't grant writing, like I talk to a lot of people who quite frankly don't want to even go there, and I think it's because that fear of rejection that we all have to deal with. You know, oh, nobody's going to consider me because they're considering all these other people who have, you know, a little bit of label weight behind them. And you mentioned the Borealis Records will smooth the way for an artist like yourself because of the connections they have and the fact that they're very respected in the business. What would you say to somebody who's starting out? I mean, do you say, look, you should really try and get in and write grants? I mean, is it important to find someone to write them for you, do you think, at the start? Is that easier, or should you just get in and do it yourself?
Well, I went to like a, what would you call it? An information session for Canada Council. They were touring around Canada and, just kind of giving people interested in applying for grants background information as to what they're looking for. So I'd say for somebody starting out, see if the organization is actually holding an information session anywhere, because that was really useful information to then go and write my grant. I kind of had a feeling for what they wanted to see in the application. It also wouldn't hurt to actually get a grant writer who has experience in it, but then the chances are you might be paying them an upfront fee and maybe even a percentage of the grant if you're awarded it, right? But also with the likes of Factor, I'm not sure about Canada Council, but there's also, smaller grants that are available for, kind of people who are just starting out or, I mean, again, they've still got to be impressed with what's being presented to them. But, I did apply to Factor. They have like, can't remember what it's called now, but they have a little grant available for that I applied for when I was just starting out with the Timeline album. They'd pay for like the production of one of the tracks or something like that, which just kind of helped a little bit. So, yeah, for somebody starting out, look to see if there's a little grant that they could write for themselves. So the littler the grant also is, the less involved the application process is usually. And just see it as like an ongoing project and profile building exercise with those organizations. Yeah.
Well, it's been great to talk to you today. If people want to learn more about your music, I'm assuming that you're all over the internet. I know when I ask this question, people say, oh, yeah, I'm on all the social medias and everything. I mean, is that the best way to get you? Check out your website? Website
is the first thing I update. So, yeah, chrisronald.com. Built it myself from WordPress. Oh, there it is. Could probably do with a little upgrade, actually, but it serves the purpose. And I've had feedback saying, I like your website. It's straightforward. It's
good.
Well, I'm a great believer in websites being important to keep up. I know that there are people out there that, and I go to artists' websites all the time. I mean, every day, and sometimes I'll be surprised that there's almost like nothing there. Yeah. And other people who, have been obviously working on their website for years, and like yours. I mean, it's something that people are updating as they go. Yeah. There are also people who've really moved away from social media, like Reed Jameson from out in Vancouver, I think, decided to do less through social media and trying to drive people through the website. I know that there's research said that, that if you can get people to pick up your newsletter and sign up, that way is probably a much better way of getting the people that won't just click like, I like your music, but will actually come and see you play.
Yeah, it goes back to that, social media just being a bit misleading.
Yeah. It's been great to have you join us. We have this little thing we do at the end of the business of music. We call it Round the Table. It's an opportunity just to get a little bit of feedback on different questions.
Kind of on the fringe, maybe.
Yeah. We're going to start off with the first question is, biggest influence on your career?
Now, but do you mean from a songwriting point of view? It's like whatever.
What popped into your head?
Your wife can definitely be in there, but whoever else you want to put in there.
I don't know. I really don't know. Biggest influence on my career. Career is a broad thing. So if it was to boil it down to songwriting, I'd probably say, Neil Young was pretty up there in kind of formulating my sound. And support of family, particularly my family back in England. have always been very interested and supportive in what I do.
That always helps.
And yeah, I think also just this inner drive,
It keeps you going.
yeah. And you need a lot of it because it's, it takes perseverance.
Yeah, well, and you obviously, I think that it seems like it's an industry, particularly with the current challenges, that really separates people out. That those people who that can roll with the punches and keep plugging away is really important.
Next question would be, what about your worst touring experience?
Worst touring experience was probably when we went to Europe last year, which on the whole was a really great tour. But, every now and again you just to kind of keep the money rolling in, it's expensive to be on tour, especially if you've got other musicians in tow. And we went to this British pub in somewhere in Germany, and we were promised bed and breakfast. We were taken upstairs to our beds, and they were a little lacking, and that makes me feel bad because I booked that show, and I've got two guys who are now thinking, we can't stay here. It's like, we had to.
Well, that can wreck a tour, right? Because you suddenly end up having to book a hotel that you hadn't expected to pay for.
Well, we tried, but there was some event. There was a big concert happening nearby, and all the hotels were booked up. So we had to just
They're rough
do it.
eh?
But you take the rough with the smooth in this business.
Best touring experience?
Best touring experience, I would say there's a venue or two in Holland which I love to play. The people are amazing, and they've really got their act together. As far as Canada's concerned, it's got to be Calgary Folk Club.
Alberta seems to have a really good folk network, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's great folk clubs in all over Alberta, and I've played a few of them, but I've played twice at Calgary. And there's 400 strong, but you can hear a pin drop though. It's just
that sounds amazing.
It's a little intimidating for the first time, but
We're going to switch horses completely. What is your favorite live album? I know you don't have one of your own yet, but what would be your favorite live album you've ever heard?
Probably Four-Way Street, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
What is it about that album that you love? I mean, is it the moment in time? I mean, the fact that they were, coming together to create something that was bigger than the four individuals that were on stage at that time?
Well, I already kind of knew about Neil Young, and then the CSNY connection kind of came a little later. So finding that album was awesome. And you also kind of get some of the little background conversations recorded in there. So you get a feel for that live experience. But the harmonies and the songs and, just great.
What about you?
Well, I was going to ask you first.
Okay. And I brought one of my favorite live albums from 1972.
Made in Japan.
Deep Purple, Made in Japan.
Oh, my God.
This was purchased in 1972.
Oh, there you go.
I pulled it out of my archives.
But did they sign it? No.
No, of course
But that's lovely. That's funny. It's one of those iconic albums. And, I recognized it as soon as I saw the gold.
Yeah, it's not that it's a really great album, but it was the time period.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Rush, and Exit Stage Left is great, and I think they have like 7 live albums, so they're all very good, but this one is pretty interesting. I really enjoy listening to that one.
And that's an interest. It's funny because when we put these questions down, Gary and I always say, well, we have to come up with our own ideas. Well, I would probably still go back to Frampton Comes Alive, even though that album had a bit of stuff that wasn't actually in the shows on it, but it's still the thing with Frampton Comes Alive as a double album is it's one of those albums that you really can just listen all the way through and you do not tire. I mean, it feels like you're at that show.
And it's funny because I just listened to a radio interview. Well, they were just discussing that album and how Peter Frampton came from Humble Pie, and the record label didn't really know what to do with them.
Yeah.
And because his studio albums did not do that well. And they thought, you know what? They went out and they actually rented a venue and put this together. And then they ended up doing some other recordings at different venues and put the album together. And it was like a killer. I mean, you had that one. Right about the same time you had that. You had Kiss Alive. You had Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. You had all these ones. The Who Live at Leeds was earlier than that.
Classic album.
And then a really good one.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say, Simple Minds, Live in the City of Life is one of my City of Light was one of my favorites. All going up live stiffs, which was Elvis Costello, Ian Jury, Nick Lowe, Larry Wallace, and Reckless Eric. And I was at that show where they recorded it, which is another thing that, when you go to a show that actually gets recorded, it's like, oh, I'm so excited.
Hear me screaming?
You have to like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Last but not least, Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
All right, you didn't even hesitate. Now she's going to ask.
Yeah, early Beatles or late Beatles? Or medium Beatles?
All of it. No preference.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
It's like
a huge.
Yeah, it's such a big catalog and it transcends a time period.
Yeah.
I listened to the Beatles a lot as a kid. I have a Beatles songbook. They were some of the first songs I ever learned how to play, and what great masters to learn from McCartney and Lennon. And Harrison, of course. I don't know. Ringo maybe wrote a couple too.
Well, I think didn't Ringo put out the first solo album after they split? I think. Ringo actually, not just the the jokes about whether Ringo was a good drummer or not. Well, of course he was a good drummer.
Yeah,
he still is a good drummer. But he's a. I think in some ways I don't think he ever got his due, which raises another question down the road. I did have one other question for you, and slightly out of sync, but I wanted to ask you this question because some singer-songwriters, when I talk to them, will say, well, they don't like to listen to other people's music. Do you find other people's music, do you listen to other people's music? Do you find it doesn't influence you, or do you find that you prefer not to dwell too much on what other people are producing?
But like any music that's out there, you mean?
Yeah, some people have said they don't like to, they're concerned about being too influenced.
No. I would encourage a varied diet of other people's music as a songwriter, and it might, I can't think of a song that sounds like that I've written that sounds like somebody else's. But there might be one tiny element that you would never know about. Maybe it's, two notes put together, that might spark or might be included in my own song. A wide variety of listening is recommended, I'd say.
It's interesting you say that because, people go on. I talk about now the Spotification of music because I think, Spotify has really changed the way that people actually create music, particularly because I think, what is it like? They want them to grab people's attention within the first 10, 20 seconds.
Yeah, the marketing aspects.
Yeah. And that's it for this edition of The Business of Music. You can find me online at folkrootsradio.com.
And I'm online at quantumsoundproductions.ca.
And Chris, it's been a pleasure having you join us today. Remember, Chris Ronald hangs out at chrisronald.com. One final question. If we're distilling our conversation down to just one piece of advice, what would be that one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring singer-songwriter?
I think find out why you're doing it. And for me, I think it's clear that I do it because I love to share and perform my creations. Be good at what you do, believe in yourself, and persevere.
So that's it for this episode. And be sure to subscribe. When you subscribe, it's great. When you comment, it's even better for us. And we want to see what you have to say, and we want to respond and make improvements, do things better, more interesting, keep you coming back.
And we have something very special for you now. Chris Ronald, live for the Sun Parlour Coffee House Sessions. One of the songs we talked about today, this is the Busker. We'll see you next time.
Well, before I was a huge folk star, I did a lot of busking in Vancouver. Granville Island is the hotbed of buskers and farmers markets, of course, and I feel that that's kind of where I honed my craft, but I also witnessed a lot of public behavior. So this song is called The Busker. It goes out to all those hardworking people out there street performing. He's a master of the cover, 50 ways to leave your lover, la 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 la, and all that jazz. Living, breathing jukebox, the poster boy for Hard Knocks, but a memory full of songs ain't all he has. For he's a wizard with a pen, and he's picked it up again like in the days when musicians still got paid. But he hasn't made a dime since he put it all online, giving everyone the choice to take or trade. He can't rely on wages, just the kind support of strangers, and a voice to sing a favorite melody. Though he hides a checkered past, every bottle, every glass, knows he's had his lion's share of misery. But he always has a smile for every captivated child. Seems like they're the only ones who understand that he's not in search of pity, and $1 for a ditty's fair exchange to get to see a one-man band. Whoa, whoa, the busker wears his heart upon his sleeve. Some words are tasting bitter, but he's not about to leave, and he's trying not to show the disappointment on his face. Think about the days, gold and silver line the bottom of his case. So there's no need to begrudge him, or worst of all prejudge him, 'cause he's just another guy with bills to pay. And if you can spare a loony, or better still a toonie, compensate him for his music, s'il vous plaît. Yes, if you hear a great street singer and you feel the urge to linger, toss a coin, make a wish, then move along. Your money will go far if you wish upon a star that you never live a day without a song. Whoa, whoa, the busker wears his heart upon his sleeve. Some words are tasting bitter, but he's not about to leave, and he's trying not to show the disappointment on his face. Think about the days, gold and silver line the bottom of his case.